Hello, everyone. Cecil Martin here.
Hey, this is Hunter Henry.
What's up, man? This is Max Crosby, part of Raider Nation.
Hey, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman.
Hey, it's Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks.
Hey, this is Jerry Judah, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and you're listening to the 14-Yard NFL Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Full10Yards NFL Podcast. I'm your host Sam Moores and we're here. We've reached the postseason. Playoff football is upon us. It's Super Wildcard Weekend and join me to break down all the games you can see on Super Wildcard Weekend in the UK. They're all on Sky Sports this week. Is Full10Yards NFL writer Charlie Grace. It's the best time of the year, isn't it, Charlie?
Would be if we hadn't lost the Patriots and we were in. It's still the best time of the year for me. Yeah. Gets fun, when every game has something on the line. Like, in week 18 you had like 4-5 dead rubbers, which no one cared about, but got over that now. We've now got every game so meaningful, and there's always a twist or two in the tail as well. So super exciting.
Yeah, before we get into previewing all the 6 matchups, there are a few bits of news since our Week 18 recap on Tuesday that we need to discuss. And we'll start right here in the UK and in Europe, where we have our home teams for the 2024 International Series. We have the Bears and the Vikings coming to play a game at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. The Jacksonville Jaguars will be back at Wembley again, and the Carolina Panthers will play in Munich in Allianz Arena. Yes, some great teams to have. A lot of them haven't been in the UK for a while. Obviously, or in Europe in a while, and the Bears and the Panthers, they've not been in Europe since 2019, so it's been a while. We saw the Vikings a couple of years ago, and the Jags obviously play every year. But yeah, we've not had a Bears or a Vikings or a Panthers home game in a very long time internationally. So it'd be nice to experience them. The Bears, we'll start with them. Their possible opponents are anyone. We're going to pick through who we think we could play, who think we could play in London, and obviously just a team that whether it be an exciting matchup or not. So the Bears, they could obviously play anyone in the NFC North at home. They also have the Rams, the Seahawks, the Jags, the Titans, and the Panthers and the Patriots on their home schedule. And as of last year, I can see the Jags being the away team here, because I don't think Carolina play in London and Munich. The NFC North, because it's so historic, is very unlikely to be played internationally. And so unless it's the Patriots or the Rams who haven't played the Patriots haven't played in the UK for a while, the Rams haven't played internationally for a while. I think the Jags probably play the Bears at Spurs. What about you, Charlie?
That would be any of the NFC North teams, because I was looking through the Vikings ones as well. It was like, you doubt it's going to be any of those teams, because they're not going to take any of those games away from the Chicago market. I could see it being the Rams, especially if the Rams kind of make a bit of an upset of a playoff run this year. They're going to have a couple of young because they've got a first round pick again this year, so they're going to have a young talent on that team. Puka Nacua just broken 2 rookie receiving records and things. So I could definitely see it being the Rams. And again, like you said, the Jags increasing their amount of games they play. Feels like it's only a matter of time until they play all 8 home games over here. Whether that's because they rebuild their stadium or whether they trial a relocation. I think the Jags and the Rams would probably be the 2 that I'd earmark for that one.
Yeah, and then as with the Vikings as well, again, very unlikely you're going to have an NFC North game internationally. So they could play any of the Cardinals, the Niners, the Texans, the Colts, the Falcons, and the Jets. So you've got plenty more teams that are more likely to play overseas on the Vikings schedule. This one could be anyone. For me, I think the Niners and the Jets make the most sense because they both have UK marketing rights and they do a lot of stuff over here in the UK. It's not a home game, but playing a game over here is still pretty important to them, so it could be them. And the other teams haven't played overseas in a while, so literally anyone could play the Vikings, and that game will probably be the one that sells out first, I expect.
Yeah, I think especially if it's the Niners, who I think most brackets you see have them as the Super Bowl favourite at the moment. To get them at Tottenham as well would be a great thing for the NFL market. The Jets probably, if Aaron Rodgers can stay healthier than 4 snaps this year, that could sell really well. And then the Texans, again, sort of like Puka with the Rams, CJ Stroud, the way he's played, D'Amico Ryans, that kind of young team that's exciting to watch. Could very easily see them come over here and make a mark as well. So yeah, like you said, that one's got a few more avenues to go down. But I mean, personally, I'd love it to be the Niners because that'd be a really fun matchup to watch. Especially just seeing the 49ers come over here because they're probably the best team in football this season, and you hope that carries on next year as well.
Certainly. And the Jags, again, I doubt it'll be a division game. So there's a few teams that they could play. One of them being the Packers, but they played in London recently, so maybe not them. The Jets, again, they play the Jags away from home, so the Jets could play the Jags instead of the Vikings. That's a real big possibility. Again, Aaron Rodgers at Wembley is quite a nice storyline. And then the Cleveland Browns or the New England Patriots, again, both of those haven't been in the UK for a while. Either. So yeah, the Jets with UK marketing rights and the Patriots and the Browns and maybe the Packers, those are contenders to play the Jags at Wembley. And I think the Jags will want a better home game, so maybe the Jets play the Jags and then and then maybe the Vikings play the Niners if you'd have a guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Josh been on the podcast this year, hasn't he? From Full10Yards, he'd love it if it was the Browns, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, the Jets obviously increased chance of playing over here, and if you're the schedule makers, you can kind of get away with giving the Vikings the Niners because you've still got the Jets, so you can bring it into Wembley. So yeah, I mean, some nice home teams. I don't know did you see the TikTok announcement that they did with the Dominoes? They announced the teams, and honestly, my mind blew. I was like, who sat there for like hours, stood all those dominoes up, made sure that they filmed that video correctly. But yeah, three nice teams to watch. Probably going to have the first overall pick coming over here. Likely Caleb Williams if it's the Bears, if they don't trade out that spot. So loads of storylines going on there, and some good opponents lined up as well.
Yeah, and then as for the Panthers in Munich, I think it could be an NFC South game because they're not as important as an NFC North game, you'd say. And I can't see them giving away their Cowboys home game because that just makes money for everyone. So, and I don't think the Chiefs are going to play in Germany back-to-back years. So for me, I think for the Panthers, it'll be either the Chargers or the Bengals, and both of those, obviously Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow playing internationally is a big thing. So I think those two make the most sense there.
Yeah. The Bengals seem to I don't know what it is, but like Bengals Panthers just sounds like an international like Germany matchup. Something about it, like Bengals could go kind of their white Bengal uniforms or something for it as well. Kind of.
Yeah, they did that in when they played the Rams in London. They wore the white ones, so they've done it before.
Yeah, you can see it happening, and I don't know, just kind of screams Berlin matchup, or sorry, Munich matchup even.
Yeah, either way, looking forward to them in October, November, and so it's always nice to see these games and over here. So honestly, it doesn't matter who plays. It's just getting NFL football in the UK and in Germany is just amazing. And then they're also going to announce the home team for the Sao Paulo game, the first ever NFL game in Brazil. That's coming in the coming months as well. So we'll have that soon, probably alongside with the schedule release in April, I expect. Right, before we get on to previewing the Super Wildcard playoff games, since Tuesday there have been a few more coaching jobs that have come up. These three came up as a bit of a surprise, to be fair, because bear in mind they were three of the longest serving head coaches in the league. On Tuesday night we saw Mike Vrabel, in fact, fired by Tennessee. I didn't think he would be fired after the end of the season, and on Tuesday I said I think he probably more likely to leave, but yeah, he was fired. They were going into the season, but yeah, Mark Vrabel was fired and he's moving on from the Titans. On Wednesday it was announced that Super Bowl winning head coach Pete Carroll would move on as head coach in Seattle to an advisor position And then this morning, it was announced that 6-time Super Bowl winning head coach Bill Belichick would leave the Patriots by mutual consent. One thing for certain, Charlie, 2024 is going to be very different with 8 jobs now available, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I know obviously NFL podcast, but then in the same 24 hours, Nick Saban also left Alabama. It's like, when Mike Tomlin finally leaves the Steelers, it's going to be like the end of our kind of the head coaches that we kind of grew up on, being in the league, and which is really strange. But I think the Bill Belichick one felt like a bit more writing on the wall.
Yeah.
And the Pete Carroll one I could understand from both his age. I don't think he had much longer left in the role anyway, because he was, moving to his mid-70s now. And it obviously takes a lot out of you being an NFL head coach, especially how animated he gets. You see him on the sideline jumping up and down. If I can do that at 72, then I'll be punching the air. But the Vrabel one really, really shocked me, because I didn't think they were going to move on from Vrabel. Or if they did, I thought it'd be through a trade. Kind of like New England come in for him and they trade him to New England. But to get rid of him like that, you get no compensation package. You wouldn't have thought they don't seem like a great destination for a head coach to go to. You wouldn't really choose him over, you could work with Bryce Young in Carolina, or Bijan and Kyle Pitts and Drake London at Atlanta. Why would you want to go to Tennessee over those guys? It's a bit strange. And Vrabel.
Unless you're like Will Levis. If you like Will Levis, then it's attractive. But other than that, it is a massive rebuild, Tennessee. And that's part of the reason why they've not been great recently, is because they're not as talented as they were when they got the number 1 seed. Yeah,
and all kind of went downhill when they traded AJ Brown.
And Vrabel did not want that to happen as well. And they fired their GM. They got a new GM in, and the Vrabel wasn't allowed input on this new GM either. So I think from the start of this season, there was friction there.
Yeah. When all that comes out, it doesn't make more sense, because I still think they've treated him pretty poorly given how much he gave to that organization. But I think Vrabel seems like a bit of a shoe-in for the New England job now, especially Bill's gone. The timing with it, with him being fired on, what was it, late Tuesday?
Yeah.
Bill being fired this morning, so that kind of feels like that's all coming together quite nicely. And then, there's so many jobs open elsewhere that Bill Belichick could go anywhere, or he could get a massive deal from Fox to go on a broadcast. So
I can see him doing TV, if I'm being honest. I think his press conferences, that although he doesn't really give anything away, so they are sometimes quite funny, and I can see maybe Brady and Belichick working for Fox or something like that potentially, next year, or maybe rival broadcasters, because maybe that we'll learn a lot more about the Patriots in the Apple TV documentary coming out next month. It goes behind the scenes of Belichick and Brady, and there's a quote in a trailer from Danny Amendola. He said they weren't playing for Belichick, they're playing for Brady, which I think sort of sums up what it was after Brady left. I think the Patriots just weren't the same team. So I think that documentary would be very interesting. And isn't it interesting as well how all 3 of these guys are defensive head coaches? It's just the way the league's going now, how everyone wants an offensive mind, especially you've got young quarterback as well. Or if your offense isn't working, you want an offensive mind to try and fix it. And that's what I struggle with Belichick, because obviously Pete Carroll's not going to get another job because he's basically retired. Vrabel's probably going to New England, but for Belichick, I don't know where he goes, because I don't really think he works anymore, and that's part of the problem, because he neglected the offensive side of the football when he was head coach and GM basically in New England, and unless he goes to the Chargers, maybe the Raiders, the rest of the other, and I don't think they want to do that better when they've just signed a New England GM and a New England head coach as well. So I don't know where Bill fits in, it's just really interesting, isn't it? Because it's an offensive league now. He's probably going to have to, either change his ways offensively. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to work wherever he goes.
Yeah, I think, because not just those 3 guys you mentioned, Ron Rivera went as well in Washington, was a defensive guy.
But yeah, Matt Eberflus is staying. Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, and Mike Vrabel are gone, but Matt Eberflus is still in Chicago.
He's managed to do that one. God knows how. That's incredible. Saw a tweet about that as well, and it's like, it seems like one of the worst decisions that they could have made, especially given they're probably going to have the number 1 overall pick as well. But anyway, live by the sword, die by the sword, I suppose. I was thinking about it, seeing central landing spots for Bill Belichick. It's like the Chargers are going to want an offensive-minded head coach now. I think after getting rid of Brandon Staley, being defensive-minded, you need to get the most out of Justin Herbert, especially while he's still on a rookie deal. I feel like Seattle want to change of ways as well. I think that's part of the reason why they moved on. They want maybe an offensive guy, or maybe someone from a new kind of defensive background. Washington are going to probably go offensive minded as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it?
Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, is it the guy in Houston?
Houston,
they're going to be top of the range for like head coaching jobs, top of the carousel. So,
and you got Jim Harbaugh as well, coming into that as well. So it's like, I think for him, I think that the Chargers' fame is perfect because you already got a quarterback in Justin Herbert, and you've got a pretty good roster. And you look at the roster he had with San Francisco, they got to the Super Bowl. So I think Harbaugh just fits. I think in LA also, LA, nice place to live. It's just whether Dean Spanos, the relatively cheap owner of the Chargers, wants to pay Jim Harbaugh, and that's the thing, isn't it, really? But for me, I think it makes too much sense.
Any place I could see Jim going otherwise would be if he went to, say, the Raiders and tried to convince JJ McCarthy to go with him. Kind of take him at 13. Seems a bit, I think it's a bit high for JJ McCarthy, but that's the only reason that I could, or the only way I could see them going that route. I feel like he fits the LA culture quite well. Yeah,
for sure. But, so it's just where Belichick goes, and I honestly, we don't have the answer for that. It'll be interesting, as these playoff podcasts come on, because there's so few games to talk about now. We can have these discussions, and as the postseason goes on, we'll update you with the latest in head coaching carousels. I think it's gonna be a very, very interesting one. We may see more fire into the next week or so. Sometimes they come very, very late. So we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. And obviously interviews now, they're just starting as well. So it's going to be a manic couple of weeks in that aspect. Right, let's get on to Super Wildcard Weekend, and we'll start with the first game. A really good game to open the playoffs with as well. It's the Browns heading to Houston after securing the AFC South title with the win over the Colts. The Texans are back in the playoffs. It's the first time since the Deshaun Watson days, of course, and it's fitting that they actually welcomed the team they traded him to, the Browns. But if you've not followed the NFL in the regular season, Deshaun Watson will not play at quarterback for the Browns this year. He's missed most of the season with a shoulder injury. But Cleveland are still here, and if anything, have actually been better since Deshaun left the lineup. Again, if you've not been following the NFL this season, we've seen the resurrection of Joe Flacco, obviously Super Bowl winner in 2012 with the Ravens. He's back in the AFC North, but this time at quarterback with the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, the Ravens' bitter rivals. And he's just taken this opportunity and run with it. It's some story, isn't it, Charlie?
Yeah, the NFL script writers this year have earned their money like fourfold, especially with these playoff matches as well. There's a couple more that come up later on. And especially if Cleveland end up winning this game, if Cleveland win this one, and then assuming that the Steelers don't upset the Bills, then Flacco's got to go back into Baltimore, and that's just, that's next level kind of narratives going on there. So it's been a great to watch, and he's it's been fun as well. It's not been sometimes if you get one of these veteran guys that comes in, it becomes a bit like game management. They go through the motions, but it's been fun to watch. Like, he's not, he dished out Amari Cooper over 200 yards against the Texans in, what was it, week 15, week 16? It's not just been dink and dunk, yards after catch type play. It's been proper like vertical threat football. They've run the ball well in the absence of Nick Chubb. I think Kevin Stefanski's got to be in for Coach of the Year, the way they've dealt with the injuries. And on the other side, D'Amico Ryan's also a Coach of the Year candidate. And CJ Stroud with his rookie year in the playoffs as well. It's just going to be a really fun game to watch.
Yeah, and we'll start with Cleveland first before getting to the Texans, because I want to talk about them quite a bit later on. Flacco's play's been great. You mentioned the run game as well, with the likes of Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt, who they re-signed this season as well. After Chubb went down with an injury, they've just been great on offense, been really efficient as well. And then you pair that with their top defense. It's just some excellent coaching, all round defense and offensively. I think Jim Schwartz has been a real difference to them on the defensive side of the ball. The Browns are on 4 in a row down the stretch to secure their place as a wildcard team, and also, to be fair, one of the best, the second best record in football. There's loads of teams at 11-6, but getting an 11-6 record with backup quarterback for a lot of the season is pretty impressive. As you mentioned, Charlie, they beat the Texans in week 16 before the backups lost to the Bengals last week. But Houston, they were without their breakout franchise quarterback CJ Stroud in that game. It was Case Keenum who played in that game, and you alluded to it there, Charlie. He's one of the best rookie seasons ever, right? He's right up there with Justin Herbert's, if not better.
Yeah, and I think the best part about it is that the draft consensus going in was that Bryce Young is so far and away the first overall pick, and all the stuff came out after the draft or during the draft process of Houston were going to pick Bryce Young at 2 if he didn't go at 1. They kind of had him above CJ Stroud on their board, so that it's kind of been a happy accident almost that he's fallen into their lap. But what a brilliant accident it's been, because he's arguably played at a top 10 level quarterback in the league level throughout the year. And he hasn't looked out of place. You wouldn't look at him and you'd say, he's a rookie. You wouldn't be able to tell that by eye. He looks settled in the offense. He looks like, he looks confident. And it feels like, paired with D'Amico Ryan's defense, like they've got a real recipe for long-term success building there. Especially with because they've still got a pick from Cleveland this year as well from the Deshaun Watson trade.
Yes, they have. They traded away the pick with the Cardinals, but they have got the Cleveland pick. So yeah, if you win this game, then you get a better draft pick. If you lose it, then you then you lose it. But yeah. I mean, either way, you win this game and get a better draft pick is quite a nice feeling for the Texans. I imagine. But that's the thing, isn't it? It's not just Stroud who's had a great success as a rookie. It's also Will Anderson, who Houston traded up with the Cardinals to pick one pick after Stroud. He might not play in this one. He's been he played last week but limitedly, and he's not practiced this week. But when he's been on the field, he's been excellent. He's been one of the best edge rushers in football, let alone the best rookie edge rushers. Yeah. He's a top 10 pass rusher according to PFF, which is just amazing for a rookie. And their front office has just absolutely smashed it, because they've got their offensive tackle, the highest paid offensive tackle in Larry Tunsil. They've got the quarterback now. They've got their pass rusher, and now Derek Stingley, who started to come on in the second half of the year. Again, he was in the top 10 of PFF's rankings as well. That's all the key positions there, and you've got a receiver in Nico Collins too. That there is how you build a championship winning rosters, and everyone laughed at me for I got a lot of flack for calling the winners of the draft in April. Everyone was like, no, they've gone up too much. Look at them now. That's all I'm saying, right? I heard this from day one. But yeah, they absolutely were the winners of the draft, because they completed their rebuild in 2 years, and they've got all those players on long-term rookie contracts, with a couple of years left, and you've got your tackle who is just on a massive long-term deal as well, and they've smashed the head coach hiring too. As you mentioned, D'Amico Ryan's someone who could be a candidate for Coach of the Year. Obviously, he was the first draft pick of the Texans. He's someone who knows the Texans so well. He's just it's just a match made in heaven, wasn't it?
Yeah, it always felt like it was going to go well, and Houston before him has had a bit of a revolving door at head coach. So like 3 in 3 years, wasn't it? And
yeah,
it was a bit of a front office mess, but they sorted it all out in the off season, and they've. You felt like even if D'Amico Ryans had like a 1-16 year this year, that they'd stick with him. It wasn't the same as what it had been before. And as it is, they've smashed it out of the park, and they look like they firmly belong in the playoffs as well. They're not like one of those teams that's kind of snuck in the back door as other teams have fallen away. They've been in the playoff hunt, in the thick of it for the whole year, and they deservedly here now at the 4th seed as well, because Jacksonville managed to choke from 8-1 or whatever it was.
Yeah, the Jags were saying playoff tickets. They didn't even make the playoffs, which is just mental. Like, but they started selling playoff tickets when they were 8-3. They didn't even make the playoffs at that point.
Yeah.
And
but they needed one win from them.
I know
They managed to really throw it away.
But anyway, yeah, the Texans made it. Again, big part because D'Amico Ryans great, great coach, obviously candidate for Coach of the Year as well, as is Kevin Stefanski, the Browns head coach, who was on the hot seat coming into this year, had to work this year because of everything they gave up for Deshaun Watson and the fact that they have, one of the best rosters in football pound for pound. But they've got here, Deshaun's not played hardly, and he wasn't playing well in the first place. They've had a load of injuries, and they're just so well drilled on both sides of the ball. They look like one of the best coaches, in football, and it's a team that has the best coach teams in football. And they're missing their best one, the best running back in football. They're missing multiple offensive linemen, and their starting quarterback, and it's a top 10 offense, scoring 30 points regularly, and a top 5, and in some categories, number 1 defense. And that's the star of the show, isn't it? It's the Cleveland defense.
Yeah, Myles Garrett, they brought Dalvin Tomlinson over from Minnesota in free agency as well. Owusu Koromoa, he's the other linebacker. Shani Taki, I think it is.
Yeah, and then you've got the back end.
Their all-star secondary is
so good.
There's no holes there really. It feels like it could be a Pro Bowl like secondary. You could see all 4 of them in a Pro Bowl.
So you've got backups who would start for a lot of teams in the NFL, and that's how they're not only good at every position in the secondary, they're also deep in the secondary. And that's just, even with injuries, it's what has helped them so well, because Denzel Ward's missed games, and Juan Thornhill's missed games. They've all missed games, but someone else has been there to step up, and because they are NFL starter already.
Yeah, and that's also a sign of good coaching as well. The next man up thing of you always got to be ready to play, but the coach have also got to scheme up kind of schemes that allow your backups to be maximised as well. You don't want them to end up playing the Raiders. You don't want your 3rd string corner being lined up over top of Devontae Adams type thing. So they're just a really extremely well coached roster, and a fun team to watch as well. Good on defense, explosive on offense. And despite all the injuries, they're still very much, any game they're going to be in, it's going to be close. It's going to be a good watch.
Yeah, for sure. Right, Charlie, it's time to pick the game. And I'll go first. And I think it's Cleveland's defense that I'm going to pick to win this game. More than anything, I think it'll be really close. But, Myles Garrett, he's current Defensive Player of the Year favourite, and I think that he has a game in this one to secure that, as TJ Watt's got injured. His pressure helps an incredibly talented secondary, as I said earlier, and it's one that is number 1 against the pass all year, and Houston don't really have much of a run game, so I think that's what will if they can basically if they butt their trend, if they just carry on being the number 1 pass defense, and they have Myles Garrett as a pass rusher, I can't see Houston winning this game, because unless Devin Singletary has an absolute worldie of a game, I think the Browns will just win this one with their defense.
Yeah, I picked Cleveland as well, because I think like you said, it's going to be a tight game, and they didn't have CJ Stroud last time they played, which is an element that you think about. But I think Cleveland's defense, it feels like a playoff built team. Strong defense and an offense that can hit you with a quick kind of 1-2 punch. Especially if they're staying fresh, if they're keeping their defense off the field as well, building on their run game, and then hit a long bomb down the field. They're one of the few teams that are probably capable of that in the league on a consistent basis. So I pick Cleveland as well, but I think it's going to be a really tight game, and it could come down to 3 points in it at the end, and it's up to a kicker to get their team over the line. But it's going to be a fascinating watch. But I think Cleveland are just a stronger team, and a more experienced team as well.
A lot of them won the playoffs a couple of years ago. Houston the Browns have been the most recent team in the playoffs out of these two. So yeah, there is something there as well. And a lot of those players were still there when last time Houston won the playoffs. It was that's DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun days, and that seems a whole long time ago now, almost 5 years ago, isn't it? So I think that'll be the advantage to Cleveland there. Right, another team that is just in the playoffs each and every year, or there's certainly got playoff experience, is the Kansas City Chiefs, and they play in the second game of the Saturday doubleheader, and this one again in the AFC. They've got all 3 AFC games and then all 3 NFC games, which is quite a nice thing to have on the schedule. So fair play to them. Second game of the Saturday doubleheader. It's exclusively on Peacock. It's on Sky here in the UK, but in America, it's exclusively on Peacock, which is NBC's streaming service. It's like iPlayer, which is really weird. But they paid $110 million just to have this game on Peacock, which is just some absurd amount of money. But this one is going to be an absolutely freezing game, and we'll get to that later. It contains the Dolphins and the Chiefs. After the Dolphins' 15-year wait for the AFC's title was extended with their something like football loss to the Bills, they now have to go on the road in the playoffs and head to one of the most hostile atmospheres in Arrowhead, home to the Kansas City Chiefs, who of course are the reigning Super Bowl champions. But they have not looked the same team this year. The playoffs have run through Arrowhead the past 5 seasons, hosting the last 5 AFC Championship games, but they've struggled down the stretch, going 4-4 and 1-3 against teams with winning records. Miami at times like this year look like the best team in football, certainly one of the best teams in football. They come into this one as a 6th seed and at 11-6 after a difficult December and January. They were 8-3 coming into December, but went 3-3 in that period, losing 2 crucial games to both the Ravens and the Bills, which lost in the division, and they lost a lot of their best players as well, which is a big contribution as to why they have struggled lately. They have now lost their 4 top pass rushers, responsible for 23 sacks. They broke a team record for sacks this year, and obviously those 3 guys, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, and Andrew Van Ginkel, were a huge part of it, as well as the centre, Connor Williams, who was playing at all-pro level. He was PFF's second highest graded centre. The left guard, Isaiah Wynn, their starting middle linebacker, Jerome Baker, and a former all-pro cornerback in Xavier Howard. They are all out for the season. And 2 of their 3 elite offensive weapons, Jalen Waddle and Raheem Mostert, have missed their last 2 games, obviously 2 huge games, and they're questionable heading into this one too. Horrific injury luck, isn't it, for a team that hasn't won a playoff game since 2000?
Yeah, especially going into the suspected weather in Kansas as well on Saturday. And it obviously plays a massive factor. So, you've got in Mostert's place, you've got A-Shane, which is, not a bad downgrade. But then you look elsewhere and the receiving core, if it's not Tyreek, it's River Craycraft or Braxton Berrios, which is a considerable downgrade. And the pass rush was non-existent against Buffalo. And if you can't rush Patrick Mahomes, then you're going to be in big trouble, because he might not have any receivers, but if you can't rush him, then you can guarantee one of them's going to get open at some point. Or he's just going to scramble and hurt you with his legs. So it feels like a bit of a disaster, a bit of a car crash at the end of the year for Miami, especially now having to go on the road in the playoffs as well. If you'd have beaten Buffalo, you at least have the caveat of it being in Miami. But now you've got to go into a snowstorm, which is kind of the opposite of what you'd have in Miami. And you've got, Tua's not a deep threat quarterback, which in the snow isn't a massive issue because you're not really going to throw the ball a huge amount anyway. And Miami are a good run team, but you can only run the ball so much without being predictable. So it's tough to call. Tyreek's going to have a chip on his shoulder, but it just feels like it's all gone wrong for Miami at the wrong moment.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that's what makes this game so interesting, because you've got obviously a banged up Dolphins team with what feels like literally the entire world against them going into this game, especially, again, the snowstorm in Kansas City. But they're playing a Chiefs team who everyone has some real questions about because they've just not been the same team. We're still wondering whether they're going to turn it on offensively. The defense has played great, but it feels weird saying it, but the Kansas City offense has been the issue this year. Again, they could redo with Tyreek Hill right now, and as you mentioned, he makes his return to Arrowhead Stadium, where he won a Super Bowl actually won 2 Super Bowls with the Chiefs. It was one. But it's just what a storyline, isn't it? Hill going back to Kansas City, they won a Super Bowl without him last year, but now you can really see that when you don't have receivers, Mahomes is struggling to be, he's still been a great quarterback, but he's not been like the best quarterback in football by far this year. They've struggled because they've not been able to create anything in the air, haven't they, this year?
Yeah, and a huge amount of their offense came from the separation that him and Kelsey could create going off script.
Mm-hmm. And Kelsey's not been the same guy this year. And that's the
often saw it, but when you don't have Tyreek and you've got a lot of players who excel in yards after catch instead of creating separation going off script, when you can double team Travis Kelsey, he can't do that as easily. Because you then got 2 guys watching him instead of 1 guy. If you only got 1 linebacker dropping into coverage, Kelsey can easily slip his shoulder and just get open. Whereas that's not been the case this year. They've not got the run game going at all. They just can't run the ball, and the drops as well. I mean, you can't get away from it. The drop problems that they've had, and there was the stat going around in week 18 of L'Jarius Sneed, and then someone retweeted it comedically saying they thought it was Marquez Valdez-Scantling's stat line. But it's comical because it's true. It's like the receivers for the Chiefs have just been so dreadful this year. They can't catch the ball. When they catch the ball, Rashee Rice is really like a really good player, yards after catch.
But what a lot of teams are trying to do now is take away him because they know he's the only guy that they're just going to rely on.
Yeah. And it all started, cast your mind back to that Thursday night, early Friday morning for us when they played the Lions, and Sky Moore dropped about 4 passes. Kadarius Toney dropped 1 or 2. And they've just never got it going on offense. And with my Broncos hat on it, you could argue the Broncos are a loss against the Patriots, arguably, away from having this, having a playoff berth. They could arguably have won the West this year because the Chiefs have been so dysfunctional. It's struggle to put your finger on what's gone wrong because it's just so unlike the team that we've seen for the last 6 years.
Yeah, and now they could turn it on in the playoffs. They often do say the best football for the playoffs. They a lot of the time say the best defense in the playoffs. So I'm excited to see what this defense looks like. Ben White's played so well all year, going into the playoffs. As that's something. And this game is it just feels like it's going to be such a low scoring game. I can't see more than 45 points being scored in this game, and
even with the weather as well.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing. It's going to be a factor. We can see one of the coldest games in NFL history. There's been a snowstorm, as we mentioned, in Kansas City this week. And Saturday night's game is forecast to be as low as -9 Fahrenheit, which is -22.7 degrees Celsius, which is absolutely freezing. And again, it could be the coldest NFL game ever. But this is playoff weather, isn't it? We're used to this in the playoffs, aren't we?
Yeah, you're always going to have the one game. And especially now you've got pretty much every game it feels like it's going through a state in the AFC anyway, a stadium in the northeast. You got Kansas City, Baltimore, and Buffalo. You're going to get at least one game with a absolutely howling blizzard wind or something like. There will be at least a missed kick in this game. I would put some money on that. There's going to be some ridiculous wind going on. The flags on the top of the upright is going to be flying. Jim Nantz or whoever's going to have the game will mention it in the pre-game. That they'll have a whole segment, like 10 minutes, just focusing on the uprights in warm-ups, how they're like doing this in the wind. And it's got to be a factor, and it just depends on which team schemes up for the weather the best, I suppose.
Yeah, and the Chiefs obviously they're more used to it. They're used to the cold weather. They're used to playing it in January as well. They've done it the last 5 years. It always feels like you got one really freezing game in Kansas City in the playoffs. They've had every AFC Championship game the last 5 years in Arrowhead in January in the playoffs, freezing cold. And Miami aren't used to that. They're a warm climate team. They're a team that has struggled historically in that environment. Since 2017, they are 0-9 in temperatures below 40 Fahrenheit, which is 4 degrees Celsius. So that's 20. It could be 26 degrees less than that this this Saturday, which is just mental. And most of those losses this year have come on the road in cold environments, so it is a real concern. But again, most of the teams they've played in that since 2017 on the road in cold environments are the Bills, the Patriots in their heyday, the Chiefs. So they have played really good teams as in that aspect as well. They played Buffalo close in a snow game on Saturday Night Football last year, and they arguably probably would have won that game had Mike McDaniel not abandoned the run. So I think that's what makes this game frisky, because the Dolphins' one saving grace, because I think the Chiefs are favourites. Everyone expects the Chiefs to do well because of their injuries. But the Dolphins have a much better run game. So if it gets to it, if it snows on the day as well, it's going to be freezing. But if it snows on the day, that will be a huge factor as well. And it's why the 4.5 point spread on this one is really frisky. But I'm picking the Chiefs to win here. The Dolphins are just too injured, and the Chiefs have been here, done it before. So yeah, give me Kansas City to win this one, which really hurts saying.
Yeah, I went Chiefs as well, just because I think the injuries are a big thing. But so the Chiefs are used to this, right? They've been here before. They've done it, and it's really scary thinking like they go to Buffalo next. If they beat Buffalo, then they're in the AFC Championship game again, and it's like, do they just become like a sneaky thing of they've been so kind of uncharacteristically disjointed all year that they even if they don't blow you out in this game, if they just just churn out a win, even if it's like 17 points to like 14, and then they beat Buffalo, because they seem to have Buffalo's number in the playoffs. They have done since that crazy game, the back and forward one at Arrowhead. Even if that is in Buffalo, the storylines and what happened in week, was it 16 with Mahomes storming off the field in a paddy? They see that as a get right game, and then all of a sudden they're back again in the AFC Championship game, one game away from the Super Bowl again.
But if they do win this game, Patrick Mahomes will play his first ever road playoff game, which is just insane to think about. It's his sixth trip to the playoffs, six different seasons in the playoffs, and yet he's never played an away playoff game. That is just, I guess it's absolutely absurd. I just don't understand
what must be his 12th or 14th home playoff game.
Something like that, yeah, mental. But it's why it's must-watch TV, because we don't know which teams are going to turn up. We don't know. Both these teams have looked really good at points this year, and it's in a freezing environment, so it's going to be box office. So that will be a good one to stay up for on Saturday night. And then the AFC concludes on Sunday with the Steelers, the 10-7 Steelers, the 7 seed heading into the Bills, the 2 seed 11-6. Just shows how close the AFC has been this year, and it's the final AFC game of Super Wildcard weekend. So again, the AFC is all done. We'll know who's playing who by about 9 p.m. on Sunday. This one's at 6 p.m. of course. Both these teams seemed quite unlikely to make the playoffs a few weeks ago, but they've both made it. The Steelers travelled to Buffalo. They're actually two of the most informed teams in football right now. They both do battle in the playoffs. In week 13, Buffalo was 6-6 and looked nowhere near capable of the 2 seed. And Pittsburgh had just lost to the 2-win Cardinals at the time, and they had 4 teams with a winning record the rest of the schedule. So it looked, pretty unlikely that the Steelers would get in to close out the season. They lost Kenny Pickett, their starting quarterback, obviously second-year guy, in that Arizona game as well, and they went on a 3-game losing streak. But they won 3 of the last 4 games against fellow playoff chasing teams, and they found some offense down the stretch too. And credit where credit's due, Mason Rudolph was a big part of that. So as well as a very good run game. But they're heading to play perhaps the scariest team in football right now, and they're going to be going into it missing their difference maker, TJ Watt. He led the league in sacks in the regular season. He's a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year, but he's likely to miss the entire postseason with an MCL sprain. Just terrible news, isn't it, Charlie? It's a shame because that would have made this game so interesting.
Yeah, you never want to see a superstar get hurt, and especially when it feels like he's the. You wouldn't say he is the Steelers, but it feels like the minute the injury was announced that he's not in, it felt like a lot more comfortable picking the Bills than you would the Steelers in this game. And so yeah, it's such a shame because it's such a big aspect in the matchup. Especially if you had TJ Watt flying off the edge, putting pressure on Josh Allen. We know how he can get when he's skittish with the ball.
Well, that's what the Dolphins did. They when they had pass rushers in the first half against the Bills, they blitzed the hell out of Josh Allen and they threw 2 interceptions. Yeah. When they lost Van Ginkel, they couldn't do that, and that's when the Bills won the game because Allen was able to sit back and throw to Dawson Knox and to Dalton Kincaid, who basically his 2 remaining weapons because they just get involved and Gabe Davis went out. But yeah, once the pressure went away, the Bills were a lot better. So again, it'll be similar. I think if Watt was in this game, it could have been really frisky. But yeah, it's certainly an uphill battle for Pittsburgh, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it to you. I think it's the Buffalo-Philly game when they had a bit of a shootout near the end. I think it went to overtime. Philly won it in overtime. But it just, Josh Allen looked different. I think that was the first game after, or it might be when they were 6-5.
They went into a bye after that. Yeah. They went to the bye and they've not lost since.
He just looked really good. He looked dialed in. And there was just something. Yeah, when you watch those players when they're on there, the nearest thing I can kind of compare it to is Ben Stokes in cricket. When he bats, there's something that you just watch them play, and they just look so dialed in. They just look so driven, and he's looked like that for the last 6 weeks, 7 weeks. And that's what makes them so scary with now having the home field advantage as well, up to potentially all the way through to the Super Bowl. And that plays a factor because Bills Mafia and the weather in Buffalo, but also just generally standing in their way is dysfunctional Kansas City Chiefs team or a Dolphins team that they know they can beat, and a Steelers team, which this feels like the most cut and dry game that you can pick, I think, out of all of the playoff games. And I think I quite comfortably took Buffalo with this one. I'm not sure about you.
Yeah. So did I. And you can't pick against them right now. They're literally just so good, especially in the big games as well. Many big games down the stretch. They beat the Cowboys, they beat the Chiefs, they beat the Dolphins. They got through those games against the Steelers, and they got through. I'm sorry, not the Steelers, the Chargers and the Patriots. They got through those games that they're trading in both those games, and they came back and won them as well. They're very, very difficult to beat right now, and they've found a run game, and that's what they've needed all this time. They've needed a run game. James Cook's been really, really good, and Pittsburgh they do struggle against the run as well compared to Miami, for example, last week, who were great against the run. They should have more success again, with James Cook in this game. They've got Leonard Fournette involved as well, and they've also got their own little tush push as well. They call it the sled, but yeah, it's where Leonard Fournette pushes, and they go to the left every single time, and it works every single time. So so that was very, very good for them in short yardage situations as well. And yeah, for me, they look like the most complete Bills team going into the playoffs, but they're not the most talented. They're just the most complete. Like in that might be the thing that gets them over the edge, and that's why I think, I don't know about you, but I think they are probably Baltimore's biggest threat in the AFC, and I think generally those teams are a cut above everyone else for me. And like with Josh Allen at QB as well, they're always going to be able to find some offense when struggling, aren't they? I won't be surprised. I heard Liam say it on a betting pod today. We listened before we prepared for our pod, and he said it wouldn't surprise me if the Steelers are up in the fourth quarter, but Josh Allen just does Josh Allen stuff because he's just so good, isn't he? And he's part of the reason why they're a cub of everyone else but Baltimore, you could say.
Yeah, I think they're definitely the two best teams on paper in the AFC, especially momentum wise. Momentum is a huge thing in sport, especially in the NFL. You always hear the stuff of it's not how you start the season, it's how you finish it, going to the playoffs and things, and they've just clicked at the right time, even despite like when Matt Milano went down in the London game, or Tre'Davious White went down. You felt like it was, again, injuries were catching up to them, and they just had too many holes. But they seem like a more complete unit this year, and they're not relying on the superstars to get them through. The rotational players are playing well as well, and the guys that they had to step up for Milano and Tre'Davious White have been playing exceptionally well as well. They both had injury problems against Miami. I'm not sure if they've practiced this week or if they returned against Miami. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they've both been exceptional. I think it's Benford and I can't remember the linebacker's name, but they've both stepped in. They've both been exceptional, and with the momentum they've got, I'd agree with you that they're Baltimore's biggest challenger. And if it came down to those two as a championship game, I don't think I'd be able to call it.
There we are. Right, attention then turns towards the NFC in the second game on Sunday, where the two teams with the best win percentage of all time meet as the Packers travel to play the Cowboys at AT&T Stadium. So much history of these two teams. It just seems right, this game being in the traditional Fox 4/9 p.m. game on a Sunday. These two teams have 9 championships between them, and they've been to a big game 13 times. They've certainly got a lot of history, and that's where I want to start, because this may be the Cowboys' best chance at a Super Bowl since their last one in 1995. They actually beat the Packers in the NFC Championship game that year as well, and they've not reached the NFC Championship game since. It seems mental because they've won the NFC East 9 times since then, but they've not got past the divisional round. But this is the most talented bunch of Cowboys teams we've seen. Dak Prescott has been one of the best QBs in the league this season, probably second to Lamar Jackson. Their defense has been stellar all year. Having a 2 seed and potentially 2 home games at Jerry World will just help them too. It's such a home field advantage. It's got to be now or never, right, for the Cowboys, surely.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that you'd say is that you look at the other side of the bracket and the Niners are up there. And you if you get to this Super Bowl, it feels like they're going to have to go to San Francisco and win. And in big games on the road this year, they've really not done well.
They're 3-5 on the road. So that 4 and 5, because they had the extra. They're 4 and 5 on the road, but even so, under 500 on the road, and they're going to probably have to play a road NFC Championship game. But once you get there, that's the thing. It's just a one-off game, and that's why. That's why for them, and also they haven't got there in so long that even getting there is an achievement.
Almost a Super Bowl in itself if you get to the championship game.
Any of the 4 teams can win it once you get to the championship game.
Yeah, and I think that Dak's been the best he's been since he got that big extension, the 80 million 4-year extension a couple of years ago, and everyone was kind of on his back for a couple of years because he'd come off his ankle injury, and it was like, has Jerry done the right thing? He's invested a lot in him, and he's not really paid the dividends for it. But he was exceptional this year. CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, what a kind of receiver 1-2 that's been. And on the defensive side, they've been so good. they got the guy from Michigan, Mazzie Smith, to shore up their D line, and they've been great in the run game. They've been stellar. Stephon Gilmore and Trayvon Diggs in the pass game, both could have the caliber to be lockdown corners. And Micah Parsons did Micah Parsons
and that's the
thing.
thing. Even after losing Trayvon Diggs, Deron Bland just came in and he's played so well.
And he's been
yeah.
I mean, what was it? Six pick sixes? 5?
Yeah, 6 pick sixes, 9 interceptions on the year in general, which is just insane.
Ridiculous numbers, and yeah, it feels like for so long everyone jokes, like this is the Cowboys are that kind of like Liverpool, the Liverpool of the NFL, like this is our year type thing. But it feels like if there's any year for it to happen, it's going to be this year. The momentum that they've got, the home record that they've got, to play 2 games in that building, and credit to Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur for getting the Packers this far as well. You got to say it. I know you said you were going to say some words on that a bit later, but it feels like a step too far to go into Jerry World and beat the Cowboys, especially as the 7 seed.
You say that, but there are a lot of murmurs that this could be a trap game for Dallas, and their top defense. I think I keep reading it, and I understand why, because the more Jordan Love has played this year, the better he's got. Again, Ollie Darcy's going to be absolutely loving me saying this because we talk about Jordan Love all the time, especially when he's on the podcast as well. But he has been a top 5 to 10 QB in the second half this year, and that's with receivers and linemen going in and out of the lineup, tight ends going in and out of the lineup as well. He was only second to Dak in touchdown passes. He threw a load this year, and you can see that he's starting to really understand defenses, which for him was excellent, because that was my one issue, because he just would throw balls into nowhere at the start of the year. But in the second half of the year, he only threw 1 interception in the final 8 games, and his completion percentage went up as well, and he got he finished top 10 QB in PFF's metrics, and in those final 8 games, he was PFF's number 1 quarterback. So it's just some numbers, aren't there? Because at the start of the year, we were a little bit concerned at how Love looked, but he's just got better every single time he's played, to now where he's throwing 3 touchdowns a game, and he's throwing the likes of Dontavian Wicks or Bo Melton open, and they're not Devontae Adams, are they?
No, and it's got to be credit to him for dealing with all the injuries and the revolving door of offensive talent he's had around him, and he's been the one constant, and his performance levels never wavered. I was a bit unsure about him at the start of the year. Last time I think I actually watched him was when the Broncos played them in week 7, I think, when we started our 5-game win streak. But you always look at the stat sheets, and he's always up there in the numbers. He's always at least got a couple of TD throws. You rarely see him on the interception column anymore. And, it's so envious of Green Bay how they're almost, it feels like they could be on their 3rd long-term quarterback in. It
looks like they could have 45 years,
40 years
of 45 years of elite quarterback, or high level quarterback play. And actually, if you look at Love's numbers side by side, they're pretty similar to Aaron Rodgers' first season numbers as well. So maybe that's a good omen. You don't, I mean, you probably want to hope that he's not going to turn out to be the human that Aaron Rodgers has turned out to be since he left Green Bay. But as a quarterback, he's certainly been excellent this year. And I mentioned, I think it could be a trap game because Dallas' defense is vulnerable, defending the middle of the field, and that's where a lot of the time that's where Love, that's where he cooks, and against the run. And recently, since Aaron Jones has been healthy, the Packers have been running the football really well as well. So that's why it does worry me a little bit, because if those are where the very, very good Cowboys defense are most vulnerable in those spots there. So it is difficult for me to pick a winner in this one. But I think I'm going to go for the Cowboys, and that's because of Dak Prescott. And I feel this game is the game that he shows the world how good he's been playing, because in the big moments, he's not really had the same level of play. I think this is his big spot. Is that AT&T Stadium. The Cowboys are so good there. He's been so good all year, and he's not received as much credit as I think he should be, because, again, I think he's been the second best quarterback behind Lamar Jackson this year, who, again, I think is MVP. And part of that's probably because of how bad he was last year. I mean, last year he wasn't good at all, and this year was a contract year for Dak Prescott, pretty much. Like, he has no money guaranteed next year, so I think they're probably going to have to negotiate something in the off-season now. And yeah, I think... Well, he's they had the option to move on from him last season. Sorry, at the end of this season, that's not happening now. He's secured his future in Dallas for this year. He's been absolutely excellent. He ended the year as PFF's second highest graded QB behind Josh Allen and just above Lamar Jackson, and their number 2 passer behind Tua Tagovailoa. And yeah, he led the league in touchdown passes, and I think he wins this for the Cowboys just because. I mean, look, I had him as my QB 19 heading into this year because he just, again, the injuries, he was injured last year, injured the year before. He just never had that consistent run in the Cowboys lineup this year, especially when the offense wasn't cooking at the start of the year. The Cowboys were struggling, but since Brandon Cooks has come on, since Jalen Tolbert's come on as well, this Cowboys offense has been really, really good, one of the best in the NFL, and it's against the Packers defense, which is a bit leaky. I'm going to pick the Cowboys to win this one, but I can see it being closer than many people think it will be.
Yeah, there's a couple of parallels and polar opposites with the Bills that you kind of like mentioned through there. Like you said about the weak point of the Cowboys, and it feels like they're almost the opposite to the Bills. You said about earlier, Liam, saying Pittsburgh could be up in the fourth quarter and you'd see the Bills winning that game. Dallas almost feel like the opposite. You feel like if they get behind, even if it's early in this one against the Packers, like, I don't know why, they just always seem like one of those teams, if they get behind the 8 ball, even at home, there's going to be like doubts that creep in, and that home crowd's going to get a bit antsy, and that can get out of control in a big spot. And then the other thing is, Allen Prescott leading the PFF grades, both of whom have, in the last couple of years, had interception to touchdown ratio problems, but both have probably been 2 of the better quarterbacks this year. They've been slinging it, and both exceptional to watch, and are both leading arguably the 2 most informed teams in the league right now. And yeah, I picked the Cowboys just because I think they're the Packers feel like they're such a young roster as well, so inexperienced at this, with playoff football. Matt LaFleur's used to it, but the roster itself isn't. But it's going to be an invaluable experience for like Jordan Love going forwards, and for the rest of that young roster going forwards. They're going to take invaluable things from this, whether they win or lose. But Dallas's home record, you can't look past it. The way they've played the last few weeks, feels like they'll just go rolling on into the div round.
Awesome. And then that sets up our final game on Sunday before the Monday night game. And it's something we've been dreaming of as a possibility for a lot of this season. It's happening. Matthew Stafford is returning to Detroit, and it's on Sunday Night Football. Just under 3 years, because it was in January, after the Rams traded for Stafford in exchange for Jared Goff and a package that included 2 first-round picks, he's back in the building where he applied his trade for 12 seasons. The trade has panned out for both teams. It's ended up being great for both teams. Both teams were winners. The Rams won Super Bowl 56 a year later after making the trade, and Detroit have just won the division for the first time since 1993 and about to host their first playoff game, their first home playoff game since then as well. It should be some atmosphere, shouldn't it? They've been waiting for so long, these Lions fans. It's a bit of a shame for them that they've got Matthew Stafford coming into the building as well. It's going to be a bit, what's going to? But yeah, it's just this is, for me, I think this is the game of Super Wildcard Weekend. I just can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, it's got all the storylines. The Stafford going back, Goff now with his new team. The Rams before the season, you'd argue, shouldn't be here. Like, everyone had them in the top 5 pick in the draft kind of conversation at the start of the year. And they've ended up having like a top 10 offense in the league, and in the last, they've gone 7-1, I think, over the stretch, and their only loss was because the Ravens kickoff return in overtime turned into Superman down the sideline. Like, that's what's between them and going 8-0 in the stretch. And they're such a dangerous team, especially with the Lions now having Sam Laporta out, which is a massive miss for that offense. But it's going to be so emotional in that building. Dan Campbell's an emotional man anyway. You got Detroit who have their first playoff game in feels like decades, is like 30 years or something like that.
Last time they played was 2016, so it's almost a decade. And and obviously they've not won a playoff game in 30 years either. So they've been in the wild card, but they've not won a game in 30 years, and this is their first home game in 30 years as well.
Yeah,
so.
that's a home playoff game, and obviously Goff playing his former team, Stafford coming back into the building. There's just so much going on, and whether it gets lost in the emotion a bit of how good this Detroit team have been, it feels like this could be the game where you get the sneaky pick of the Rams winning, because they've got so much momentum. They're still a good team. Aaron Donald on the defensive line, but Kobe Turner, the D lineman out of Wake Forest, has been really good this year, and they just feel like they're playing with a chip on their shoulder, all 53 of those guys, because of the conversations going into the year. And it feels like they could catch Detroit off guard a little bit in what's going to be a game with emotions running really high. Yeah,
certainly. And we'll start with the Lions before we get into the Rams, because I share some similar views of you as well. It's the Lions' offense has been a standout unit for them this year. Ben Johnson is getting tons of head coaching interviews, and rightly so, because they're so balanced. They're good at, they're good in the pass. They're good at, with the run as well. And they are putting up points. They've been putting up points the last 2 years. He's been coordinator, and they've been really, really good. But as you mentioned, there's a concern about how they're going to operate in this game, because they've unfortunately lost their stand-up record tight end, Sam Laporta, to a knee injury in a win over the Vikings. He has an outside chance of playing, apparently, according to Dan Campbell. He hasn't ruled him out yet. But from how bad it looked, I hardly doubt he suits up, if I'm being completely honest with you. And yeah, you mentioned it there. It's going to be a huge loss for the Lions. It just seems, they didn't have, the reason why he's injured is because they played their starters. They played literally every starter in their win over the Vikings last week, hoping to get the 2 seed. But the problem was that game was before the Cowboys played, so they had to win that and then wait. Maybe if the NFL scheduled those games, Detroit at the same time as Philly and Dallas, they could have pulled their starters out once they realised that Dallas were, they won by 4 scores against Washington, and maybe it could have been avoided. It's just it's a real big shame, isn't it? Because obviously they wanted the 2 seed. Dan Campbell wanted this team to play hard, but if anything, they've probably lost one of their best offensive players in the process because of that, haven't they?
Yeah, I think part of that's down to Dan Campbell, because even if you win, you've got to hope that, a Dallas team that's rolling go into Washington and lose. And it didn't feel like that was ever going to happen.
And they had to they had to get Philly to lose as well. And they did lose. They got spanked, but he wasn't to know that
you can't
AJ Brown and Jalen
Hurts
when he got hurt. Yeah.
And it's, it feels like a bit of a, we know he's a guy who wears his heart on his sleeve, and he always wants his team to play, smash mouth. They epitomise how he is, Dan Campbell, but it felt like a bit of a mistake on his part, and he is still an experienced head coach in the grand scheme of things, and he'll learn from that. But it does feel like they've kind of got in their own way a little bit with the Laporta injury, and that might come back to bite him in this one.
Certainly. As for the Rams, you mentioned it there. I remember having that conversation. I did my roster rankings. I shared them with you, and we were talking about how we both agreed that the Rams had like a bottom 5, bottom 3 roster in the entire league, and yet they're here. They found some great rookies on defense, as you mentioned, Kobe Turner. They also found Young as well to pair on defense with Aaron Donald, and then on offense is another rookie in Puka Nacua, who you mentioned at the start of the podcast. Has made history by breaking the rookie receptions and receiving yard records. The receptions one from Jalen Waddle 2 years ago, and the receiving yard record from the 60s. So that it's really, really impressive feat by him. And obviously Sean McVay, the coach of the Rams, Super Bowl winning head coach, he's had an excellent year we knew he was a good coach, but in pre-season we did question whether his heart was still in it or not. There was a lot of talk about him going to Amazon after the season to do Thursday Night Football, to be the colour analyst alongside Al Michaels. But this year he's been great. He's had a Coach of the Year type season, and Leslie's draft picks as well have been home runs. Especially they didn't have a first round pick, but there were 3 really really good rookies from later on in the draft class. It's just some turnaround, isn't it? We just did not expect this at the start of the year. We thought McVay would elevate a team to maybe 6-7 wins, but the fact they finished with what was it, not 10 wins and had the playoffs secured with a game to go and beat the Niners as well. That is some feat, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you not just the picks from this draft has gone. Kyron Williams as well. He was like a 5th rounder in 2022. That would be.
Notre Dame.
He's been exceptional as well, and the difference between Dan Campbell and the inexperience of the Week 18 with Sean McVay and the Week 18 was that clip where Nakua got his record, and the first thing he was like, he gave a fist bump, and then the first thing he said was get him out, like get him out of the game, and that
Cooper Kupp didn't play in that game
either.
either.
That's the difference of you protect your superstars, you get them their incentives or whatever, but then you don't risk them past a certain point, because superstars in this league are so invaluable. Like the drop off in like Nakua to even is it Ben Skoronski or Skoronik? I can't remember
Ben Skoronik, Ben Skoronik.
Yeah, Skoronski's the tackle in the draft.
Tennessee.
But the Skoronik, no disrespect to him, but the drop off from him to Nakua as your like 2 receiver is big. And you've got to kind of take that into consideration. But yeah, McVay, another kind of coach of the candidate, because this team was on paper nowhere near this level of ability, but they've really pulled the cat out of the bag, and they're on pace. I've seen a lot of people pick it, but very much in the conversation to being upsetting the Lions on the road as well.
Yeah, and I'm one of them. I'm tempted by it. I really am. I feel that QB is a big difference here, certainly. And part of the reason why the Rams moved away from Jared Goff is because he struggles in the big moments. Now, this is a big moment. And, the Lions' defense also worries me. They're 23rd in points per game allowed, 27th against the pass, which is where the Rams, are really good at. It's their major strength. And, I just don't know. I mean, without that Lions D line, this defense would be a disaster. So I do wonder why Aaron Glenn is getting head coaching interviews, because his defense hasn't been great. And yeah, for me, it's why I'm picking the Rams, because I just feel like this is going to be a shootout, and I think the best QB wins a shootout. So give me the Rams to upset the Lions here. I just got a feeling, and it's just written in the stars. Stafford goes into Detroit, wins a playoff game in Detroit. And
the Rams,
I just have a feeling that's what's going to happen. All those times they could have got in, or all those wildcard losses, I think Stafford wins this game. In front of the Lions fans. I think it's just written in the stars.
Yeah, I'm gonna side with you as well. I just think it would also be this Rams team to everyone have them as like you said, bottom 3 roster or whatever, and then end up not even being one and done in the playoffs, and then winning a playoff game, which is no mean feat in this league. And it feels like Detroit feel like a team that would get lost in the emotion of the occasion and the game because you're going to have the storylines from it all Sunday leading up to the game. There's going to be stuff on the broadcast before the game. As a Detroit fan, it's going to be natural, especially in the building as well, to go to your first playoff game, you're pumped up, but then Matt Stafford, who was your quarterback for 12 years, who you're undoubtedly going to have some kind of emotional attachment to, comes out for the other team, trying to win for the other team. And you saw it with, was it Decker and Goff, were in tears when they won the NFC North. Like, let alone going into your own building to play your first playoff game in however long. So it feels like the amount of emotion in the game, it could get a bit, the Lions could get lost in that. The Laporta injury as well is quite big with how the defense, the offense operates. And yeah, it just feels like it's going to be one of those games where it's not banana skin, because the Rams are by no means a bad team. They've proven that all year, but they could easily win this game out. I'm going to pick them for it.
Yeah, awesome. And then that leads us to our last Monday Night Football game of the season, the Monday Night playoff game on Super World Cup weekend. It's a game between two teams that have had differing form to close the season. The Eagles are the reigning NFC champions, but look far from the team that reached the Super Bowl a year ago. They started the year 10-1, but went 1-5 down the stretch with their offense stalling and their defense ending up one of the worst units in the entire NFL as the Cowboys won the NFC East. They had Tampa, who are 4-7 in Week 12, but won 5 of their last 6, 3 in division to claim the NFC South title and book a home playoff game, which just set up a really frisky playoff matchup. Especially the Eagles as well. Like, it's just weird because the team this talented just should be better than this. They're not exactly injured either. They're quite healthy. Brian Johnson's offense has struggled to reach the end zone lately too. They averaged just 19 points a game in those final 6 games. I find it weird that he's getting head coaching interviews too. This offense will be much better than that. And then the defense has a fair few all-pro level players at every level as well, pretty much. But it's got worse since Matt Patricia took over from Sean Desai, who was already calling some bad defense in the first place. They're 30th in points per game, 26th in yards per game, and 31st against the pass. Which, yeah, I'm sure the Bucs were excited about. What do you think of this issue has been with Philadelphia? Do you think it's a coaching issue? Do you think it's it's just so weird because we just did not expect this when they were 10-1, did we?
Yeah, and I think part of it possibly arrogance. You saw the Sirianni clip when he walked off when they beat the was it when they beat the Chiefs, and he was shouting and bawling down the tunnel. That was you don't want to see your head coach doing that. It's just quite an unhinged thing to do. And then the record they've had since has kind of personified that. And I think part of it is we didn't realise how good Gannon and Steichen were. Mm-hmm. And you
can see with both their teams.
The way their teams have played this year, the Cardinals they almost beat the Seahawks in Week 18. They beat
the Cowboys
and the Eagles in Week 17.
Yeah.
And they were good merit for those. And even in the games that they've lost this year, they've looked like a competitive outfit. Again, with a poor roster, a bit like we were talking about with the Rams earlier. And then the thing Shane Steichen did with even a Gardner Minshew-led offense, when Anthony Richardson's back in there, that's going to be a really fun watch with Jonathan Taylor healthy again. So I don't think we quite realised how important they were to that group. And in general, I think it just became a bit of an ego problem for Philly, and it's got out of control, and they haven't been able to grasp it. They haven't been able to take a bye week and settle things down, go back to basics. They've just spiraled out of control, got lost in the emotion of it, and coming up against Tampa now on the road as well. It's like, they were 10-1. They were supposed to have a playoff game. The NFC was supposed to either go through Philly or San Francisco again, and now they're going to Tampa on Monday night, and it feels like a disaster waiting to happen almost.
Yeah, and again, we mentioned their defense as well. The fact that Mark Patricia is calling defensive plays now is just, especially when his defense does not suit what this Eagles defense is as well. It's an absolute disaster. As I mentioned, the 31st against the pass, and again the Bucs, their pass heavy offense is what has really got them here, because it's their biggest strength by far. Give Baker Mayfield some time just down the field, and he's a good quarterback. And if all else fails, then Mike Evans is down there somewhere, right? And that's been their success this year. A lot of it, they those two receivers and with Baker, they've really found some success this year, haven't they?
Yeah, and I kind of wish the Colts had got in, because Baker Mayfield and Gardner Minshew playing playoff games would have been absolutely blockbuster telly. But as it is, we've only got Baker, which I'm happy enough about, and they have a genuine chance to win this game as well. This isn't this isn't like the Bills Steelers or anything where it's cut and dry. Philly are going to win this game. Philly on an absolutely out of control downward spiral against a Bucs team that, they scraped past Panthers the other day on week 18, but the Panthers are so bad, you only ever need to scrape past them.
That game was so freaky. Like, they had so many defensive plays. It's one of the weirdest games I've ever watched. Like, honestly, there's so many good pass breakups. But like, if you love defense, watch Panthers Bucks from last week. It's one of the weirdest games I've ever watched. Like, I'd call it an anomaly. That's the word. I call it an anomaly because it was just so weird. I mean, you had literally like touchdowns or just touchbacks and like loads of stuff. So it was a weird game, but they got through it, and that's the main thing with them.
Yeah, and I think with their superstars, Godwin and Evans, they've always got a chance of being in the game, and the way that the Eagles are trending, the Bucks aren't necessarily trending up, but the Eagles are trending so far down that they've been in free fall for weeks, and even if they scrape through this game, you don't see them winning it against any of the divisional round teams. I don't think the Niners, the Cowboys, or the Rams, whoever that would be that they play. I think it would probably be the Niners, wouldn't it? I know the Cowboys, they'd probably go into AT&T, but I don't know who you're picking, but I think I'm going to go with the Bucks just because I think they're the home team, and the Philly are just so out of control in a spiral that they didn't score against the Giants. Wink Martindale has been MIA since the game, and yet they still couldn't score against him. Like, they've had the defensive coordinator drama in the week after they shut you out, which is just ridiculous. Like the spiral that they're in.
Oh, for sure. I'm going to pick the Eagles. This is the first one we're going to go differently on. The only one we're going to go differently on. But I think it's just because their defensive line worries me for Tampa Bay. They're just so scary, and Baker's not the same QB under pressure. We saw that in Cleveland. When these two teams met in week 3, he struggled then. He only had 146 yards, a TD, and an interception, and the Eagles won 25-11. And I just think that the Eagles will create 8 to 10 pressures with that D line as they did in that game, and that might be, maybe they get a turnover off that, and that might be enough to win this game. Because I think it'll be a shootout, and I think I just think I'm not confident, but I just think it's time they turn up, and I think their D line against Tampa Bay's offensive line is a worry for Tampa Bay, I think. So give me the Eagles to win this one, but as I said, I'm not confident about it, and I really was flip flopping going into the podcast about who I was going to pick. I can't lie.
It's going to be a strange game, I think, especially to close out the divisional round. But I just think the way that both teams are trending, specifically the way Philly's trending, I just struggle to side with them in any game, picking against any team at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Right, that leads us to our Super Bowl Challenge prediction. It is the NFL UK and 888 Sport challenge where you can pick your playoff bracket and you can compete in a fantasy league against your friends. And just see whose predictions come out on top. You can play in our Full10Yards NFL podcast, Super Bowl Challenge League. The link for it is in the description. It'll also be on social media as well after the podcast is posted. And we have both picked our brackets. We're both in the league, and we're going to go through our remaining Super Bowl predictions before we end the podcast. Playoff predictions before we end the podcast. So I have the Browns and the Ravens meeting in the divisional run next week, as well as the Bills and the Chiefs. As much as I'd love to see Joe Flacco win in Baltimore, I just can't see it happening. So I'm going to go for the Ravens to win that, and I'm going to go for the Bills to win at Arrowhead. I just don't trust the Chiefs, which seems so weird saying. And then that sets up a Bills-Ravens AFC Championship game. And I've gone for the Ravens to win that. Home team. They just look so good. They've won the big games this year as well, which is when it's really mattered, especially down the stretch against Miami and San Francisco, which sets up a Ravens AFC representative in a Super Bowl. And then in the NFC, I have got the Niners playing the Rams because they beat the Lions, and I had the Niners beating the Rams, even though the Rams beat them last week. Obviously, backups it was, but yeah, I think that'll be closer than many people think it will be. But I just think the Niners are too talented to lose to the Rams. And then I've got the Cowboys Eagles. What a two divisional NFC divisional round games there as well. Two interdivision ones. And I got the Cowboys beating the Eagles. Again, as you mentioned, Charlie, I just don't see the Eagles winning another playoff game if they win this week. And that sets up a Cowboys Niners NFC Championship game, which that is just headlines. That'll be the one that's on the late at night, of course, because it'll be in San Francisco. And yeah, I'm gonna go for the Dallas Cowboys to win that game. I feel it's their time. It's their time. So it'll be a Ravens Cowboys Super Bowl, and I've gone for the Baltimore Ravens to win the Super Bowl 12 years after the last one. Against us, actually 11 years after the last one, and they beat Joe Flacco on the way to do that as well, which is some story. But yeah, give me the Ravens to beat the Cowboys in the Super Bowl. How does your bracket look, Charlie?
So I had the Ravens beat the Browns in the divisional round, the first one, and then the other one, the Chiefs, the Bills over the Chiefs in the second one. I think those are two great narrative games. Buffalo, all the former wins that they've, all the past games they've had with the Chiefs, and then this one actually in Buffalo. And then obviously you touched on the Flacco and Brown stuff, and then in the AFC Championship game, I went Baltimore over Buffalo just because I think Baltimore are the more complete team. I think Lamar would prove why he's the MVP in that game, and the Ravens got a pretty underrated pass rush as well. So I think they could cause some problems for Josh Allen in that, like we were talking about earlier, disrupting him and forcing him to beat with his arm. And then on the NFC side, I also had the Niners beating the Rams, and then I had the Cowboys beating the Bucs instead of the Eagles, which again sets up the juicy, the mouth-watering championship game, which I picked the Niners over the Cowboys for just because home field advantage. I think that Dallas's road record scares me a lot. Picking that game, and the Niners, I think, the best team in football right now, and I had them beating the Ravens and winning the Super Bowl. But I mean, that's
repeat
going to be
as well. Repeat of the Super Bowl.
2012 Super Bowl?
2012 season, 2013, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully the lights stay on for this one. But yeah, I had the Niners kind of getting their revenge in that game and lifting the Lombardi.
Wouldn't it be mad if?
Brock Purdy is a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Yeah, I know.
Incredible.
That's mental. And would it be bad as well if we have a rematch of that game? Obviously, John Harbaugh in the Super Bowl, and then Jim Harbaugh coming back to the NFL in the same time as well. That's such a just it's just like the stars were aligning almost. It's honestly as you mentioned earlier, the script writers, they've had an absolutely tremendous season with setting up this playoffs, because I think it's the most excited I've been for the playoffs ever, potentially, because you've got so many storylines going into it, and it's just. Yeah, it's just
in Hollywood, but not in the NFL.
Exactly. There you go. Yeah. It's just so exciting. I can't wait. And that concludes the podcast. So make sure to join our Super Bowl Challenge League. The link will be in the description on your provider, whether you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon, wherever you listen to your podcasts. It will be in the description for you, as well as all the timestamps, so you can go back and listen to our predictions if you want to. But yeah, no, Charlie, thank you for joining me, mate. It's been great. It's been awesome, and we'll have you on before the end of the playoffs for sure, I'm certain.
Yeah, Thanks for having me, and looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun weekend of playoff football again. It's crazy it's come around so quick, but can't wait for it.
Yeah, that it will be, and I'll see you for the recap on Tuesday. It's on Tuesday because of the Monday night game, but yeah, we'll recap it on Tuesday morning, every single one of the Super Wildcard weekend games, and I just can't wait to see them. I've been Sam Morse. This has been the Full 10 Yards NFL podcast, and I will see you then.